The gates of Buckingham Palace stood tall and silent in the morning light. Tourists gathered behind the iron bars, cameras ready, waiting for the changing of the guard. But on this particular Tuesday, something was about to happen that no one expected. Among the crowd stood a young woman named Sarah. She held the hand of her 5-year-old daughter. Emma, the little girl, wore a bright yellow dress and carried a worn teddy bear under her arm. Her eyes were wide with wonder as she stared at the guards in their red uniforms and tall black hats. Emma had been talking about this trip for weeks. She called the guards toy soldiers and believed they were made of wood. Sarah smiled at her daughter's innocence, but there was sadness behind that smile. This trip was special. It was a promise Sarah had made to Emma's father before he passed away 6 months ago. The crowd pressed closer to the gates. Emma squeezed through the legs of adults, getting as close as she could. Sarah tried to keep up, calling her name softly. But Emma was determined. She wanted to see the soldiers up close. One of the guards stood perfectly still at his post. His name was James. He had been serving for 3 years. He knew the rules by heart. Never move. Never smile. Never break formation. No matter what happened around him, he was trained to remain like a statue. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Emma finally reached the front. She pressed her small face against the cold iron bars. For a long moment, she just stared at James. Then, in a voice clear and innocent, she spoke. "Mr. Soldier, are you real?" The crowd chuckled softly. James didn't move. He kept his eyes forward, his expression blank. But inside, something stirred. He could see the little girl from the corner of his eye. She wasn't like the other tourists. There was something pure about her curiosity. Emma tilted her head. "My daddy said soldiers are the bravest people in the world. He was a soldier too." Sarah's heart clenched. She stepped forward, reaching for Emma's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. The guard can't talk. He's working." But Emma didn't move. She held up her teddy bear, pressing it against the bars. "This is Mr. Buttons. He's brave too. Daddy gave him to me." James felt a lump form in his throat. He had seen children before, hundreds of them. But this one was different. There was a weight in her words that he couldn't ignore. Sarah gently pulled Emma back. "Let's go see the other guards, okay?" Emma's face fell. She looked at James one more time, her big eyes filled with disappointment. She thought he was just another toy soldier after all, not real. Not alive. As Sarah led her away, Emma whispered, "Maybe he really is made of wood." James stood frozen in place. His hands gripped his rifle a little tighter. He told himself to focus, to forget. But he couldn't. Something about that little girl had cracked through his armor, and then, from somewhere in the crowd, he heard a sound that changed everything. A child was crying. Not Emma, someone else in the crowd. The sound was sharp and sudden. It cut through the murmur of voices and camera clicks. James couldn't turn his head, but he listened. The crying grew louder, more desperate. Then came a woman's voice, panicked and breathless. "Has anyone seen a little boy? He's wearing a blue jacket. Please, someone help me." The crowd shifted. People looked around, confused and concerned. James remained still, but his mind raced. A lost child. Right here at the gates. His training told him to stay in position. But every instinct screamed at him to move. Sarah heard it too. She looked down at Emma, making sure her daughter was safe beside her. Emma's eyes were already searching the crowd. "Mommy, someone lost their little boy." "I know, sweetheart. Let's stay right here, okay?" The frantic mother pushed through the tourists. Her name was Rebecca. Her son Oliver was only 4 years old. One moment he had been holding her hand. The next, he was gone. Vanished into the sea of strangers. Rebecca's voice cracked as she called his name. "Oliver? Oliver? Where are you?" James could hear the terror in her voice. He had a younger brother. He knew what it felt like to protect someone. To fear losing them, his jaw tightened. His fingers twitched. But he couldn't move. Not yet. Then, from somewhere near the palace gates, came a small voice. "Mommy." Everyone turned. A little boy stood near the side entrance, tears streaming down his face. He was clutching a toy car in one hand, looking lost and scared. Oliver. Rebecca's face flooded with relief. She ran toward him, pushing past the crowd. But just as she reached the gates, something stopped her. A palace security officer stepped forward, blocking her path. "Ma'am, you can't go past this point. Authorized personnel only." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "That's my son. Please, I just need to get to him." The officer's expression was firm. "I understand, but I need you to wait here. We'll bring him to you." Oliver saw his mother and reached out his small arms. He started crying harder, not understanding why she couldn't come to him. The distance between them was only a few meters, but it might as well have been miles. The crowd watched in tense silence. Sarah held Emma close. The little girl's eyes were fixed on Oliver, her heart breaking for the boy who just wanted his mom. James stood at his post, every muscle in his body screaming to do something. He could see Oliver from where he stood. He could see Rebecca's desperate face. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Another guard stood a few meters away. His name was Marcus. He was older, more experienced. He had trained James when he first joined. Marcus didn't move either. His eyes were forward, his face like stone. But then Oliver did something that changed everything. The little boy started walking, not toward the officer, not toward his mother. He walked straight toward James. Oliver's small shoes echoed on the stone ground. He stopped right in front of James, looking up with wet, red eyes. In his shaky voice, he said something no one expected. "Can you help me find my mommy? I'm scared." The crowd held its breath. Cameras pointed at James. Everyone waited to see what the stone-faced guard would do. Rebecca's hands were pressed to her mouth, tears rolling down her cheeks. James looked down at the boy. 4 years old, terrified, alone. And in that moment, James made a choice. Slowly, carefully, he moved. He bent down on one knee, breaking every rule he had ever been taught. The crowd gasped. Marcus stiffened, but didn't stop him. James looked Oliver in the eyes and spoke softly. "You're safe now. Let's get you back to your mom." He gently took Oliver's small hand and stood. Then, with the little boy beside him, James walked toward Rebecca. His tall frame moved with quiet authority. No one stopped him. No one dared. When they reached the barrier, James carefully lifted Oliver over the low section and placed him in his mother's arms. Rebecca sobbed as she held her son. She looked at James, unable to speak, but her eyes said everything. "Thank you. Thank you for choosing kindness over rules." James nodded once, then turned and walked back to his post. He resumed his position, eyes forward, expression blank. But something had shifted. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just watched in silent respect. Some wiped their eyes. Others nodded quietly. Emma tugged on her mother's hand. "Mommy, he is real. He's not made of wood." Sarah smiled through her own tears. "No, sweetheart. He's very real." And as James stood at his post once more, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not from following orders, but from listening to his heart. But the day wasn't over. What happened next would touch even more lives. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but many stayed. They wanted to see if something else would happen. If another moment of humanity would break through the rigid ceremony. Emma hadn't moved. She was still staring at James with wonder in her eyes. Sarah knew that look. It was the same look Emma had when her father would come home in his uniform. Pride, admiration, love. "Can we stay a little longer, Mommy?" Emma asked softly. Sarah checked her watch. They had other places to visit. But something told her this was more important. "Okay, sweetheart. A little longer." Crossed the courtyard. Marcus watched James from his own post. His face remained expressionless, but inside, he was wrestling with something. He had been a guard for 12 years. He had never broken formation, not once. He had seen James do what he himself had been too afraid to do, and it bothered him. Not because it was wrong, but because it was right. and he had missed the chance to be that kind of person. The morning sun climbed higher. Tourists came and went. Emma sat on the ground near the gates, drawing pictures in a small notebook Sarah had given her. Every few minutes she would look up at James and smile. He couldn't smile back. But somehow, she didn't need him to. An elderly man approached the gates. He walked with a cane, his steps slow and careful. His name was William. He was 82 years old. He wore an old military jacket with faded medals pinned to the chest. William stopped near James's post. He didn't take photos. He didn't laugh or chat with tourists. He just stood there, staring at the guard with a strange intensity. After a long moment, he spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. "You remind me of someone." James didn't respond. He wasn't supposed to. But something about the old man's tone made him listen. "My son," William continued. "He was a guardsman too. Served right here, actually." "Stood where you're standing now?" The old man's eyes grew distant, lost in memory. He was good at it. Never broke formation. Not once. Even when. His voice faltered. William took a shaky breath. "Even when I came to visit him one day, I had just lost my wife. His mother. I was broken. I stood right here and called his name. Begged him to look at me. Just for a second. Just to let me know he cared." Tears began to roll down the old man's weathered cheeks. But he didn't move. He stayed strong. Followed the rules. I was so angry at him for that. For choosing duty over his own father. James felt his chest tighten. He wanted to look at the old man, to show some sign of comfort. But he remained still. "I didn't speak to him for a year after that," William said, his voice breaking. "And then he was deployed. Killed in action 6 months later. I never got to tell him I understood. That I was proud. That I loved him." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the tourists nearby had stopped to listen. Emma looked up from her drawings, her young face full of concern for the crying old man. William wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. "When I saw you help that little boy earlier, it reminded me of something. That the rules don't matter as much as people do. I wish my son had known that. I wish I had told him it was okay to be human first and a soldier second." He paused, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small pin. It was a military service badge, old and worn. "This was his," William said quietly. "I've carried it every day since he died. But I think he'd want someone like you to have it." William stepped as close to the gate as he could and held out the pin. James's eyes flickered down to it just for a fraction of a second. But he couldn't take it. He couldn't move. The old man understood. He nodded slowly and placed the pin on the stone ledge near James's post. "You're a good man," William whispered. "Thank you for reminding me that good men still stand guard." William turned and walked away, leaning heavily on his cane. The crowd watched him go in respectful silence. Emma stood up. She walked over to the pin and stared at it. Then she looked up at James. "Mr. Soldier, the old man is sad. Can I help him?" Sarah came up behind her. "Emma, sweetheart, let's leave the guard alone now." But Emma didn't move. She picked up the pin carefully, holding it in her small hand. She looked at it, then at James, then back toward the direction William had gone. "I'm going to give this back to him," Emma said firmly. "He shouldn't be alone." Before Sarah could stop her, Emma ran. Her little legs carried her through the crowd, chasing after the old man who was slowly making his way down the path. Sarah's heart jumped. She started to follow, but someone gently touched her arm. It was Rebecca, still holding Oliver. "I'll go with her," Rebecca said softly. "Make sure she's safe." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She watched as Rebecca and Oliver hurried after Emma. James watched too. He couldn't turn his head, but he tracked their movement from the corner of his eye. Something told him this moment wasn't finished yet. Emma caught up to William near a bench. She tugged on his jacket. The old man turned, surprised to see the little girl in the yellow dress. "Yes, Mr. Emma said, holding up the pin. "You forgot this. It's important." William looked down at the pin, then at Emma's earnest face. Fresh tears filled his eyes. The soldier couldn't take it, Emma explained. But I think your son would want you to keep it, because you love him. And that's more important than any rule. William's hand shook as he took the pin. He sank onto the bench, overcome with emotion. Emma climbed up beside him and held his hand. My daddy died too, she said softly, but Mommy says he's still with us. In here, she touched her chest, right over her heart. William couldn't speak. He just nodded, squeezing the little girl's hand. Rebecca stood nearby with Oliver, giving them space but staying close. Oliver watched quietly, still clutching his toy car. Back at the gates, Sarah wiped her eyes. James remained at his post, but something had changed in his expression. A softness. A crack in the armor. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who had become witnesses, everyone understood something profound. That kindness wasn't weakness. That breaking rules for the right reasons took more courage than following them blindly. But there was still more to come. Emma sat with William on the bench for nearly 10 minutes. She told him about her father, about Mr. Buttons the teddy bear, about how brave soldiers were. William listened to every word, the pin clutched tightly in his hand. Rebecca and Oliver waited patiently. Other tourists passed by, some stopping to watch the unusual scene. An elderly veteran and a 5-year-old girl, sharing grief and hope in equal measure. Finally, Emma hugged William and ran back toward her mother. William stayed on the bench, but he was no longer crying. For the first time in years, he looked at peace. Sarah met Emma halfway and scooped her up in her arms. That was very kind, sweetheart. He needed a friend, Emma said simply. Like I needed Mr. Buttons when Daddy left. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. She looked back at James, who was still standing at his post. Their eyes met for just a moment. He gave the smallest nod. She smiled. Can we go back to the soldier now? Emma asked. I want to show him something. Sarah was about to say no. They had already caused enough distraction. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the look in Emma's eyes. Maybe it was the magic of the day. Either way, she nodded. They walked back to the gates. The crowd had grown larger now. Word had spread about what happened earlier. People wanted to see the guard who broke formation to help a child. Some had their phones out, recording, hoping for another moment worth capturing. Emma approached the gate once more. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. It was one of the drawings she had made earlier. A simple crayon picture of a soldier standing tall with a little girl beside him holding his hand. Above them, she had drawn a sun and the words thank you in wobbly letters. She pressed the paper against the bars, as close to James as she could get. This is for you, she said, because you helped Oliver. And because you're not made of wood, you're made of heart. James looked down at the drawing. His throat tightened. He couldn't take it. He couldn't move. But he wanted to more than anything. Marcus, watching from his post, felt something stir inside him. He had been standing there all morning wrestling with his own conscience. And now, seeing this little girl offer such pure gratitude, something in him broke. Slowly, Marcus turned his head. Just slightly. Just enough to look at James. Then he did something he had never done before. He smiled. It was small. It was brief. But it was real. The crowd noticed. A few people gasped. Others smiled. Marcus turned his head back to position, but the moment was captured. Cameras had recorded it. Hearts had felt it. James saw it too. He felt a warmth spread through his chest. Permission. Validation. Support from a man he respected. And then, James made a decision. He shifted his weight. He took a breath. And then slowly, he bent down on one knee again. The crowd fell silent. Every eye was on him. James reached through the bars and took the drawing from Emma's small hands. He held it carefully, looking at the crayon soldier and the little girl. His eyes glistened. Thank you, he whispered. His voice was rough with emotion. This means more than you know. Emma's face lit up with the biggest smile. You talked. You're really real. James nodded. Very real. He looked at Sarah. Your daughter has a beautiful heart. You should be proud. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. Her father would have loved this moment. He was a soldier too. James's expression softened. Then she carries his courage. I can see it. He carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into his jacket, close to his heart. Then he stood and resumed his position. But this time, something was different. He didn't feel like a statue. He felt human. The crowd erupted in gentle applause. Not loud or obnoxious, just a quiet, respectful clapping that acknowledged what they had witnessed. A guard choosing compassion over protocol. A child teaching adults about kindness. Rebecca approached with Oliver. The little boy looked up at James with wide eyes. Thank you for helping me, he said shyly. James gave him a small nod. Anytime, mate. Rebecca's voice was thick with emotion. You didn't have to do that. You could have stayed still. But you chose to help. Thank you. James wanted to say something profound, something meaningful. But all that came out was, he needed his mom. That's all that mattered. More people began to approach, not to mock or test the guards, but to thank them, to acknowledge them as humans doing a difficult job. To show respect and gratitude, an older woman stepped forward and placed a flower near the gate. For your kindness, she said simply. A young man gave a salute. You're a good man. A teenage girl left a handwritten note. Thank you for reminding us what matters. James stood still, but inside he was overwhelmed. He had spent 3 years perfecting the art of being emotionless, of being untouchable. And in one morning, a 5-year-old girl had cracked that wall wide open. Marcus watched it all. He felt pride for his fellow guard, but he also felt regret. How many moments had he missed? How many chances to be human had he let pass by? As the sun reached its peak, a shift change was announced. New guards would soon take their positions. James and Marcus would be relieved. Emma sensed their time was running out. She pressed her face to the bars one last time. Will you be here tomorrow, Mr. Soldier? James looked at her. Maybe not tomorrow, but I'll always remember you. I'll remember you too, Emma said. And I'll tell everyone about the brave soldier who helped Oliver and talked to me. James smiled. A real, genuine smile. You do that? Sarah took Emma's hand. Time to go, sweetheart. Emma waved goodbye. Bye, Mr. Soldier. Stay brave, you too, little one. They walked away, disappearing into the crowd. James watched them go. Emma's yellow dress, bright against the sea of people. The shift change happened. New guards arrived. James and Marcus stepped down from their posts and walked toward the palace entrance. As they entered the quiet hallway inside, Marcus stopped. He turned to James. That was the most human thing I've seen in 12 years. James looked at him. I thought I'd be in trouble. Marcus shook his head. Maybe by the book, but not by me. He paused. You reminded me why I joined. Not to be a statue, but to serve, to protect. Even if that means breaking formation when it matters. James felt relief wash over him. Thank you. They walked together in silence for a moment. Then Marcus said something unexpected. I'm going to request a transfer. To active service. I think I'm done being a showpiece. James looked at him, surprised. Really? Marcus nodded. That little girl taught me something today. That courage isn't about standing still. It's about moving when people need you. James smiled. She taught me that too. As they changed out of their uniforms, James carefully removed the folded drawing from his jacket. He looked at it again, at the crayon soldier and the little girl. He would keep it forever. A reminder that beneath the uniform, beneath the rules, he was still human, and that being human was the bravest thing he could be. But the story doesn't end here. 3 days later, James was at home when he received an unexpected phone call. It was his commanding officer. His heart sank. He thought this would be the reprimand he had been dreading. Guardsman Fletcher, the voice said formally. You're needed at headquarters tomorrow morning. 9 sharp. James swallowed hard. Yes, sir. May I ask what this is about? There was a pause. Then, surprisingly, a hint of warmth in the officer's voice. You'll find out tomorrow. But Fletcher, bring that drawing the little girl gave you. The line went dead. James sat in his small apartment, confused and anxious. How did his commanding officer know about the drawing? What was going to happen? That night, he barely slept. He kept replaying the events of that Tuesday morning. Had he made a mistake? Had he dishonored the uniform? Or had he done the right thing? Morning came too quickly. James arrived at headquarters in his dress uniform, the drawing carefully tucked in an envelope. He was led to a conference room he had never been in before. When he entered, he froze. The room was full of people. His commanding officer sat at the head of the table. But around the room were others, reporters, photographers, and sitting in chairs near the front were faces he recognized: Sarah and Emma, Rebecca and Oliver, and William, the elderly veteran, looking stronger than he had 3 days ago. James's mind raced. What was happening? His commanding officer stood. "Guardsman Fletcher, please sit." James sat stiffly, his heart pounding. The officer's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Guardsman, do you know why you're here?" James shook his head. "No, sir." The officer gestured to a screen behind him. It flickered to life, showing a video. It was footage from the palace gates. The moment James knelt down to help Oliver. The moment he took Emma's drawing. The moment he chose humanity over protocol. This video, the officer said, has been viewed over 10 million times in 3 days. It's been shared across the world. People are calling you a hero. James blinked in disbelief. "Sir? I just helped a child. I didn't mean to break protocol." The officer finished. "You're right, you did. But you did something more important. You reminded the world what our service is really about. Not ceremony, not tradition, but people." The officer picked up a folder from the table. "We've received thousands of letters in the past 3 days. From parents, from veterans, from people who felt touched by what you did. I want to read you just one." He opened the folder and pulled out a handwritten letter. This one is from a father whose daughter has been afraid of authority figures since a traumatic incident. He says watching your video, seeing you help that little boy with such gentleness, helped his daughter begin to trust again. She asked to meet a guard like you, to see that kindness and strength can exist in the same person.
How?
James felt his throat tighten. He had no idea his actions had reached so far. The officer set down the letter. "You're not in trouble, Fletcher. Quite the opposite." He walked around the table and stood before James. "We're presenting you with a commendation for exemplary service. But more than that, we're starting a new initiative. Based on what you did?" James looked up, confused. "An initiative, sir?" The officer nodded. "We're training all our ceremonial guards on compassionate response, teaching them that their primary duty isn't to stand still. It's to serve, to protect, and when necessary, to connect." He gestured to the others in the room. "These people wanted to be here, to thank you personally." Emma jumped up from her chair. She ran to James and hugged his leg. "You're famous, Mr. Soldier." James's eyes filled with tears. He knelt down to her level. "I never imagined any of this." Emma held out a new drawing. This one showed James kneeling beside Oliver, with hearts drawn all around them. "I made you another one, for being the best soldier ever." James took it carefully. "I'll treasure this too." Rebecca stepped forward with Oliver. The little boy was less shy now. He looked James in the eye. "My mummy says you saved me. Not from danger, but from being scared. Thank you." James shook his small hand. "You're very brave, Oliver. Don't forget that." He moved slowly, but with more energy than before. He held out the military pin. "I want you to have this now. My son would have wanted someone like you to carry it forward." "Ah!" James hesitated. "Sir, I couldn't." "You can," William said firmly. "You've earned it. Not by following rules, but by knowing when to break them." James took the pin with trembling hands. He looked at the old man, seeing decades of grief and pride in his eyes. "I'll honor this. I promise." William nodded. "I know you will." Sarah stood back, watching with tears in her eyes. James noticed her and stood. "Your daughter is remarkable," Sarah smiled. She gets it from her father. He would have been so proud to see what you did. He believes soldiers should be protectors of hearts, not just borders. James's voice was thick with emotion. He raised an incredible daughter. The commanding officer cleared his throat. There's one more thing, Fletcher. He gestured to the reporters. These journalists want to tell your story. To show the world that military service is about humanity, not just discipline. Are you willing to speak with them? James looked around the room. At Emma's smiling face, at Oliver's grateful eyes, at William's proud expression, at Sarah's tears of joy. He had spent 3 years trying to disappear behind a uniform. But now he understood. Real strength wasn't in being invisible. It was in being present, in being human. Yes, sir, James said. I'll tell the story. The next hour was a blur. Cameras flashed. Questions were asked. James spoke from the heart about why he broke formation, about the little boy who needed help, about the girl who reminded him that soldiers aren't made of wood. The reporters ate it up. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was pure. In a world full of cynicism, this story was hope. When it was over, Emma tugged on James's sleeve. Mr. Soldier, can I ask you something? Of course. Will you come visit my school? I told everyone about you. They don't believe me. James laughed. I think I can arrange that. Emma's face lit up. She hugged him again. You're my favorite soldier in the whole world. James felt his heart swell. And you're my favorite little girl in the whole world. As the gathering began to break up, Marcus appeared in the doorway. He was out of uniform, dressed in civilian clothes. He looked different. Lighter somehow. He walked up to James. I saw the news. Congratulations. James smiled. Thank you. Are you? Leaving the ceremony unit? Marcus nodded. Transfer came through this morning. I'm joining a humanitarian mission overseas, helping rebuild schools in areas affected by conflict. James felt pride for his friend. That's incredible. Marcus looked at Emma, who was showing her drawings to Oliver. That little girl changed both of us. Reminded us why we signed up in the first place. She did. James agreed. Marcus extended his hand. Stay good, Fletcher. The world needs more people like you. They shook hands firmly. Then Marcus left, walking toward a new chapter of his life. James stood there, surrounded by new friends, holding a 5-year-old's drawings and an old soldier's pin. He thought about how a single moment of choice could ripple outward, touching lives he'd never even meet. Emma ran back to him one last time before leaving. Promise you won't forget me? James knelt down. I promise. You changed my life, Emma. I'll never forget you. She kissed his cheek and ran back to her mother. Sarah mouthed a silent thank you before leading Emma toward the door as they left. James looked at the drawing in his hands. The crayon soldier with the big heart, the little girl holding his hand. He smiled. For the first time in 3 years, he knew exactly who he was. Not just a guard, not just a soldier, a human being, with a heart big enough to care. 6 months passed. The world moved on, as it always does. But the story of the guard who broke formation never truly faded. It lived on in the hearts of those who needed it most. James kept his promise. He visited Emma's school on a bright spring afternoon. The children gathered in the gymnasium, their eyes wide with excitement. Emma sat in the front row, proudly announcing to anyone who would listen, "That's my soldier friend." James spoke to the children about bravery, but not the kind they expected. Not about battles or medals. He talked about the bravery of kindness. The courage it takes to help someone when it's easier to look away. Real strength, he told them, isn't about how tough you can be. It's about how gentle you can be when someone needs gentleness. The children listened, captivated. Afterward, they lined up to shake his hand. One little boy, who reminded James of Oliver, asked, "If I'm scared, will you help me like you helped that other kid?" James knelt down to his level. "If I can, I will. But you know what? You're braver than you think. Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us first." The boy smiled, his fear melting away. Emma watched from nearby, beaming with pride. That evening, James received a letter. It was from Rebecca. Inside was a photo of Oliver at his first day of kindergarten, wearing a bright blue jacket and a huge smile. The note read, "He's not afraid anymore. Thank you for showing him that the world has good people in it. You gave him more than help that day. You gave him hope." James pinned the photo to his wall, next to Emma's drawings. His small apartment was slowly filling with reminders of the lives he had touched. Each one a story. Each one a reason to keep being human. The new compassionate response training had begun at the palace. Guards were being taught when it was appropriate to break formation, how to help those in distress, and most importantly, how to remember that they served people, not just tradition. Younger guards would sometimes approach James during training. They'd ask him about that day, about what went through his mind. He always told them the same thing: listen to your heart. The rules are important, but people are more important. William, the elderly veteran, had become a regular visitor at the palace. He would sit on the same bench where Emma had comforted him, watching the changing of the guard with new eyes. Other veterans began joining him. They'd share stories, laugh, and occasionally cry together. The bench became an unofficial gathering spot for those who understood the weight of service. One day, William approached James after his shift. "My son's regiment is having a memorial service next month. Would you come? I'd like you to meet his friends. Tell them what you told me." James didn't hesitate. "I'd be honored." At the memorial, James stood before dozens of veterans and their families. He shared the story of the little boy who needed help, the girl who taught him about courage, and the old man who reminded him that our past doesn't have to define our future. "I never knew William's son," James said, his voice steady but emotional. "But I carry his legacy with me every day." He pulled out the military pin William had given him. It gleamed in the afternoon light. "This pin reminds me that service isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about showing up for people when they need you most." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the service, veteran after veteran came to shake James's hand. They thanked him not for what he did, but for what he represented. A new generation of service. One that understood that strength and compassion weren't opposites. They were partners. Sarah and Emma attended the memorial too. Emma had insisted on coming when she heard James would be there. She stood beside him during the service, holding his hand, her yellow dress replaced by a respectful black one. But she still carried Mr. Buttons under her arm. After the ceremony, as people mingled and shared memories, Emma looked up at James. "Mr. Soldier, are you happy now?" James thought about the question. 6 months ago, he had been a statue, emotionless, disconnected, going through the motions of a life without really living it now. He was surrounded by people who mattered. He had purpose beyond protocol. He had connections deeper than duty. "Yes," he said honestly. "I am because of you," Emma smiled. "Good, because you deserve to be happy. You make other people happy, so you should be happy too." The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze him. Sarah came over, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We should get going. It's getting late." James nodded. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot." Sarah looked at him with gentle eyes. "You've become like family to us. Emma talks about you all the time. You've helped her process her father's death in a way I never could." "She helped me too," James said. "More than she knows." As they walked away, Emma turned back and waved. "Bye, Mr. Soldier. Stay brave. You too, little one." James watched them disappear into the evening. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the memorial grounds. He felt William's presence beside him. "She's something special, that girl," William said. "She really is." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then William spoke again. "My son would have liked you. He would have been proud to serve alongside someone like you." James felt the weight of those words. "That means everything to me." William patted his shoulder. "You've given an old man peace. That's worth more than any medal." As the months continued to pass, James's life transformed. He was promoted to training instructor, teaching new guards the balance between discipline and humanity. He spoke at schools, veterans halls, and community centers. His story inspired others to choose compassion over convenience. But the greatest change was internal. He had learned that being vulnerable wasn't weakness. That showing emotion wasn't failure. That connecting with others was the most important mission of all. Emma grew taller. Her drawings became more detailed. But she never stopped creating pictures of soldiers with big hearts. She sent one to James every month, and he displayed each one proudly. Oliver started school and made friends easily. He no longer cried when his mother wasn't in sight. The fear that had gripped him that day at the palace had transformed into confidence. Rebecca would later say that James had saved more than just that one moment. He had saved Oliver's childhood. Marcus sent postcards from overseas. Pictures of schools being built, children smiling, communities healing. He wrote about how that day at the palace had changed his entire trajectory. How one little girl's kindness had set him on a path he never knew he needed. And William, the elderly veteran, lived to see his 85th birthday. At his party, surrounded by friends and fellow veterans, he told the story of the guard who reminded him that his son's legacy wasn't in the rules he followed, in the heart he carried. William kept the military pin until the very end. When he passed peacefully in his sleep, he left instructions for it to stay with James. "He carries my son's spirit forward," the note read, "and that's exactly where it belongs." Years later, James would stand at the palace gates once more. Now as a senior officer, he would watch young guards take their positions. And he would remember the day a 5-year-old girl in a yellow dress taught him that being human was the bravest thing a soldier could be. And on that day, every day he carried 3 things with him: a folded crayon drawing of a soldier with a heart, a photograph of a smiling boy in a blue jacket, and a military pin that represented generations of service, sacrifice, and love. These weren't just objects. They were reminders that every person we meet has a story, that every moment offers a choice, and that the most important rule to follow is the one written in our hearts. Be present. Be kind. Be human. Because in the end, that's what people remember. Not the uniform. Not the ceremony. But the moment when someone chose to care. And those moments, those beautiful moments with children at the palace, those moments when even the toughest guards couldn't resist being human, those are the moments that change the world. One small act of kindness at a time,